Dear students, welcome to the e-learning core 3, Fixed Income Analysis. In session 1.1, you will get an introduction to the bond market and its importance for the economy. Moreover, you will become familiar with the main characteristics of bonds. Now, let's start with session 1.1, Bond Characteristics. The learning goal of this session is to obtain a basic understanding of the bond market and to know the main characteristics of bonds. The figure on the left-hand side shows the volume of outstanding bonds in the United States from 1985 to 2016. Looking at these data, we immediately recognize that the bond market is huge and it grows steadily over time. In 2016, the volume of outstanding bonds in the US bond market was $39,361.5 billion US dollars. In the same year, the market capitalization of the US stock market was $27,352.2 billion US dollars. Comparing these numbers implies that the volume of outstanding bonds in the US exceeds the value of the US stock market by more than 40%. As you see yourself, these numbers illustrate the importance of the bond market for the economy quite impressively. In the previous slide, we learned that the size of the bond market is larger than the stock market. But who are the market participants? To answer this question, we have to think about the fundamental role of financial markets in the economy more generally. Financial markets perform the essential economic function of channeling funds from households, firms, and governments that have saved surplus funds by spending less than their income to those that have a shortage of funds because they wish to spend more than their income. In the bond market, savers are very often insurance companies, pension funds, or mutual funds. Bonds are issued by a variety of institutions that have a need to borrow. Among these institutions are governments, companies, municipalities, banks, and government agencies. Bonds are debt securities that obligate issuers, the borrowing institutions, to bondholders. Bondholders can be considered as creditors since they provide an amount of cash to the issuer. Bonds are fixed income securities, meaning they have a par value which is simply the repayment of the debt by the issuer to the bondholder at maturity. Many bonds pay coupons to investors. Coupons are essentially the interest rate payment to the debt holder. In Europe, coupons are paid once a year, while in the US, coupon payments very often occur once every 6 months. The coupon rate of a bond determines the interest payment. Let us illustrate this by means of an example. Suppose the par value of the bond is $1,000 and the coupon rate is 10% paid every year. Then the coupon payment is 10% times 1,000, which corresponds to $100. Sometimes so-called zero coupon bonds are issued that make no coupon payments. In this case, investors receive par value at maturity date, but receive no interest payments until then. The bond has a coupon rate of 0. However, these bonds are issued at prices considerably below par value, and the investor's return comes from the difference between the issue price and the payment of par value at maturity. Let's have a look at a particular category of bonds, so-called corporate bonds. Corporate bonds are issued by corporations, which have a need to borrow money in order to finance parts of their business. In this example, we look at Goldman Sachs, a large US investment bank. The par value of the bond is $1,000 and maturity date is January 2020. The bond pays a coupon rate of 5.75%, meaning that the bond pays every 6 months $28.75 to the bondholder. The price of the bond is given in percentage points of the par value, meaning that the bond price of 109.4040 implies a current market price of $1,094.40. The price of the bond is above par, meaning that investors need to pay a premium in order to buy a bond which is repaid at par. Such bonds are called premium bonds. The reason why the bond price trades above par is due to the fact that the coupon rate of 5.75% exceeds the bond's yield to maturity. Later in the course, we will understand the economics behind this fact, but for now, we take it as given. Now let's have a look at some recent innovations in the bond market. A rather recent bond category are index bonds, which are indexed to the general price level in the economy or to the price of a commodity. In 1997, the US Treasury started to issue inflation-indexed bonds, so-called Treasury Inflation Protected Securities, or TIPS. By tying the par value of the bond to the general price level, coupon payments, as well as the final repayment of par value on these bonds, increase in direct proportion to the consumer price index. This implies that the interest rate on these bonds is a risk-free real rate. To illustrate how TIPS work, let's have a look at an example. Suppose a newly issued bond with a maturity of 3 years, par value of $1,000, and a coupon rate of 4%. For simplicity, let's assume coupon payments are annual. Moreover, assume that the inflation rate turns out to be 2%, 3%, and 1% in the next 3 years. In year 1, the observed inflation rate is 2%, which means that the par value of the bond increases from $1,000 to $1,020. Because the coupon rate of 4% is computed from the par value, it follows that the coupon payment is 4% of the par value of $1,020, which is $40.80. In the final year, the investor receives a final coupon payment of $42.44, plus the price level index repayment of the principal of $1,061.11. It follows that the nominal rate of return in the first year is 6.08%, while the real rate of return is exactly the 4% real yield on the bond. After having carefully studied session 1.1, please start with the review questions.